So fun fact, the clothing company Kith, its name derives from the phrase kith and kin, which means friends and family. Interesting, right? Also, Lululemon. So as the story goes, the owner came up with the name because he liked that it had so many L's in it. And that when certain people try to pronounce it, they had a hard time saying it. So he found it kind of funny. So he decided to stick with it. Clothing company names and names in general for any company normally has a rich history behind it. And what we have to do when creating brands is that we need to really take our time and come up with a good name and have a good story for it. So when people ask about it, they get really into it. So what is the name of your brand going to be? Let's talk about it next here on Making the Brand. What's up, everybody? Rob Norman here from Planet Brooklyn Academy, and this is Making the Brand, the series where I give you insight and knowledge on how to start a clothing company, and if you already have one, how to make it better. As always, before we begin, hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can get updates on when we drop new stuff every time. So what's in a name? When you're creating a clothing brand, a lot of people spend a lot of time focused on creating the graphics, creating the garments, coming up with marketing. They spend the least amount of time, if you notice, on the name. And not to say that the names are bad, but most of the time people don't really spend as much time as they should on developing a name. Your name is your calling card, and you should take as much time creating that as much as you do the rest of your line. Now, when someone looks at you and looks at your brand, they're already, before they even see anything, they're trying to figure out what the brand is about. Much like you are a brand as a person. The moment you sign your name to anything and someone sees your name, the first thing they're trying to figure out is, what's your gender? What's your age? Because a lot of times, based on the generation of names, certain generations, there are certain names that are more popular. And people can figure out that based on the name, what decade you were born in. Because if it's a popular name and maybe something that's not popular now, someone can figure that out based on your name. They're also trying to figure out what your race is, what your ethnicity is. They're trying to look at based on your name. So there's a lot of different things that can be figured out from your name before you even arrive. The same thing happens when you create a clothing brand. People are looking at that name. That's the first thing that shows up. And they're trying to figure out from that what type of brand you are. If you're going to be an upscale brand and you have an exotic name, that can work. But if you're trying to do something different and you want to use your name and your name is just something regular, I really would strongly recommend against using your name. Now, if you really think your name is great, then hey, by all means use it. But sometimes we got to step aside from our egos and look at the greater good. Because what you're trying to do here is build a brand. And as I said, your name holds a lot of weight before the product even makes its appearance anywhere. So make sure you think about that. You wouldn't buy clothing that was, let's say, sold in a store and had the label Ralph Lipschitz on it. You wouldn't buy that, would you? Sounds like something you would probably get in a Walmart or Target, right? Well, I'm pretty sure that was the same thing that went through Ralph Lauren's mind. If you study fashion and you know your fashion history, you know that Ralph Lauren's real name is Ralph Lipschitz. And as soon as you hear that, you know that is not something you want to wear. But Ralph Lauren, well, that's a whole different story. That name alone sounds like something much more regal, something you really want to wear. People have even pronounced the name much differently. Instead of Ralph Lauren, trying to make it sound more than what it is. And that is because the name comes across as that. He knew that using his original name would not help him sell clothes. But changing it to that is what has boosted and made the brand famous, synonymous in upper echelon circles. It's all in the name. The story is in the name. When you hear Ralph Lauren, you don't even think about the clothing. You automatically go to the story, what it represents, who it represents. And And this is the same thing. You have to think about creating your brand. What do you want your name to represent? What do you want your name to stand for? What is the story behind your name? Because the story is what gets a lot of people into your brand. When they know that you came up with this name based on X, Y, and Z, people get very interested in that and they want to know more and they start to dig into your brand. So you have to take that into consideration. Now, another thing I like to consider when working with brands and helping people develop brands is that I like to think about I like to call it my 4, 5, 6, 7 rule. And this is basically on how many characters are in a name. When you're working with names that are too large, it really becomes a design issue. So when you're dealing with brands that have letters that amount to 4 to 5 characters, which is normally the safe end of the scale, and 6, 7, which I feel is just the maximum you should have, they always look good. And the reason what I mean by it looks good is because when you have to take those names and shrink it down and put it on labels and hang tags, and when you have to do marketing for it and you have to make it really small, the problem with names that are too long is that when you try to shrink it down, vertically it gets smaller, but you're trying to make everything fit widthwise. So as you bring it in closer, everything vertically is getting smaller. So you're losing detailing in the wording and the logos and stuff like that. But when you use things in a 4, 5, 6, 7 scale, when you shrink them down, they still stay in proportion, they still look good, and it works. So just think about brands like Puma, Nike, Kith, all fall into that kind of 4, 5 rule. And then when you think about other brands, when you think about Adidas, Reebok, they fall into that 6, 7 category rule, which works perfectly. Now I know what a lot of you are thinking, you're saying, Rob, but you break your own rule with your own name of your brand. Well, yes, I do. But I am an exception to the rule because Brooklyn is not a name I created. Brooklyn is the name of my city and I'm using it that way. So I have to work with what I have. But I do use the shortened version of the name when I'm creating logos. So I'll use the BKLYN, which again falls into my rule of the 4, 5 category. So I'm able to use that on different graphics and things of that matter. But most people who are outside of Brooklyn do not know the abbreviation, so that's why I have to use the long version of it. But again, I still find a way to work around that. I use that with my abbreviated version. Now, when you think about brands like Anthropology, that's a long name. And when you try to put that on the end of marketing or you try to shrink it, it can get really crazy. If you look at their business cards, things get small. You know, if you don't have great eyesight, it really doesn't work for you. So again, I like to stick to that 4, 5, 6, 7 rule. And if you think about it the same way when you're developing it, it helps you a lot as you're designing. Now, you may think of someone like a brand like Crooks and Castles. Crooks and Castles is a lot of letters, but they still fall into that 4, 5, 6, 7 category rule because they're 2 separate names. So you can actually stack them. So you can stack them to make them smaller, scrunch them down, it still looks good, you don't have a problem. So in certain cases, if you have 2 names, in your name, you can stack them accordingly. You can try different things with them. Again, I'm always worried about the length of things and how it's going to fit. When you think about the inside of a label of a shirt, if the name is too long, that means I have to make a thinner label. The problem with thinner labels are that it wraps around the back of your neck. And that could be a problem because it could irritate. So a lot of these things are stuff that people don't think about when they come up with a name. They just come up with a name and they just, put it out there. Think about what your story is. What is your name representing? How does it represent your brand? All that comes into play. And as you sit there and you think about these things, you'll start realizing that there's a lot more than just putting your own name on the brand. Sometimes you have other things that are related to what you're designing, your history, your background, what your brand is about that really gives you a better concept to come up for a better name. So keep those things in mind. That's it for this episode. So if you guys have any questions, please leave your messages down in the comment section below. I will make a separate video answering any questions you have for this video or from any of our past videos. So please do that for me. And we make new videos every Monday and Wednesday. So check us out here. Until next time, peace.